let's get this show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, jelly beans and crocodiles, it is my great honor and my privilege to welcome you to the Masters of Storytelling here at Wyrd Con. My name is True Thomas the Storyteller. I've been a traditional storyteller for over 25 years. And during that 25 years, I created a nonprofit called DreamShapers, and I probably saw close to 500, 600 storytelling performances, something like that. And then during that time, I also worked with the National Storytelling Network and several other storytelling conferences, and I helped this gentleman here. I was his volunteer coordinator for the Los Angeles Storytelling Festival for several years, and I got to be honored with the friendship of these two gentlemen. To my right, Exhibit A, is the amazing Bill Howard, a fantastic storyteller, shanty man, expert on Arthurian lore, and my good friend. To the left, Exhibit B, we have Michael D. McCarty. He is a griot, contador, a person who travels all around the world, and I believe me when I say all around the world, as a professional storyteller. His trademark is have mouth, will run it, and you can usually tell when Michael is in the building because you can hear him come in. He's just, woo! Michael. And we are very, very, very honored because they have donated their performances here tonight for Wyrd Con. So give them a round of applause. So I'm going to start us off with Mr. Bill Howard, who I have the honor of performing with on a regular basis, well, somewhat regular basis.
Whenever anybody will put up with us.
Yep. We will often go to like Dickens festivals and Irish festivals as a pair of ne'er-do-wells called Bob's Your Uncle. And we do all sorts of street singing and trickifying and goofy-doing, and we have a good time. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Mr. Bill Howard.
This is a story, one of the first that when I first started actually doing this. There's I don't know if it's still in print, but I recommend very highly, if you're at all interested in this in an art form, a book called Homespun by Jimmy Neal Smith, who seemed to be president for life of the National Storytelling Network. And in that, it's a wonderful book on how to tell stories, but also a compendium of stories, and it included this story from a fellow by the name of Ray Hicks. Ray Hicks was from a very musical and story active family in North Carolina, and he himself is a national treasure. He knew more Jack tales than just about anybody, and this is one of his stories, and it's called Soldier Jack. And Jack was a soldier, and he'd been a soldier for a long time, almost as long as he could remember. And after a while, though, being a soldier, they ran out of wars. So Jack didn't have nothing to do. They didn't need no more soldiers, so they let all the soldiers go. Now, today, when you get out of the army, at least they give you some money, and you got maybe give you an education, but all they give to a soldier coming out of the army that time was 2 loaves of bread. And that was it. When Jack was walking down the road, he had a loaf of bread under one arm, a loaf of bread under the other arm. He was walking down the road, and he was feeling happy because he had his whole life ahead of him. And as he's walking down the road, he saw a beggar man there in the middle of the road, and that beggar man was poorly and sickly and hungrily, and he looked at that beggar man and he says, "You look poorly and sickly and hungrily, and I'm going to give you that loaf of bread, and you eat that, and God bless you." The beggar man was grateful, and he said, "Thank you, thank you." Jack went down the road. He was feeling really happy about that, feeling very good about himself, and he got about a half mile down the road, and he met another beggar man. And this beggar man looked poorly and sicklier and hungrilier than the first one. And he looked at that beggar man, and he looked at that loaf of bread, and his stomach said, "Boo," because he'd forgotten that he ain't eaten anything that morning. And he said, poorly and sickly and hungerly, but all I got in the world. I'll tell you what though, here, you eat half of that and you get better and you feel good and you start walking down the road. You saw that bigger man standing there, that half a loaf of bread. Jack turned around and said, "Mister, I done you wrong. There's another man down the road. I give him a whole loaf of bread, but I only give you half. That ain't fair. Here, you take that other half, and you eat that, and you get better, and you walked up. And the old man, he said, son, you come back here. You come back here. I know what you done. That was the onlyest loaf of bread you had in the world. And you give it to me. Now that was an act of magnanimity, and that deserves a reward. Don't you go away, come back here. Now I got something right over here. Stay where you are. Now you see this here? This looks like a regular old tater sack. It's only got a drawstring and everything. But it ain't just a regular old tater sack because it's magic. You see anything in the whole world that you want, no matter how big they are, no how many they are, all you got to do is say, whickety whack, in my sack. They're going to go right in, and no matter how many they are, no how big they are, it's going to weigh no more than a cat. And you take that and don't you go away. You see this here? Looks like a regular old blue glass drinking glass, don't it? But it ain't a regular old blue glass drinking glass because it's magic too. Now, you see anybody in the whole world that's ailing, all you got to do is fill this 3/4 full of water and you look through it. Look at them through it. And if the blubbers goes to the top, they're going to live. If the blubbers go to the bottom, they're going to die. That's going to make you a doctor. You take that and you use them wisely. And Jack looked at this blue glass drinking glass and his tater sack and thank you. And he put them in his backpack and walked down the road. He is hungry. And his stomach is going blubble, 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 blubble. Now this is November. And all the trees didn't have no leaves on them. And he looked over to the side of the road and there was a tree with no leaves. But there was something else in that tree. On every single branch of the tree, there was a wild turkey roosting. And that branch had about 27 branches, so there's 27 wild turkeys up there in that tree going and somebody going He said, well, what am I going to do about that? I ain't got a gun, I ain't got a slingshot, I ain't got nothing except a tater sack. So he reached into his backpack and he pulled out that tater sack. He says, yo, turkeys! Wickety-whack in my sack. All of them 27 wild turkeys went right down that tater sack and pulled the drawstring close, put it over his back. It didn't weigh no more than a cat. And he walked down the road. He come to an inn, kind of a hotel, and he walked right into the parlor of that inn, and there's the fellow that owns the inn, the innkeeper, sitting there on the sofa, and he looks up at Jack and says, what you want, boy? Jack says, well, I'm a soldier. I know that. I saw the uniform. What you want? Like to have some place to sleep tonight, something to eat. You got money, boy? No, you don't. No. So all they give you is 2 loaves of bread, and I don't see no bread on you. Well, no, I ain't got no money nor no bread. But I'll barter with you. What you gonna barter with, boy? Well, I got me 27 wild turkeys. Well, what, you got a wagon outside? No, I got it right here in this sack. Get out of here! No, I do, I promise! Will you open that sack and let me see? Well, come on outside. No, right here! In the parlor? Right here, boy. Right there. Jack, he opened that sack, and all them 27 wild turkeys come right out of there, done terrible things to his sofa. But he didn't mind. He didn't mind. He says, all right then, all right. I'll take them 27 wild turkeys. There's 27 wild turkeys. Carry the W. I'll tell you what. I'll give you dinner tonight, breakfast in the morning, a bed to sleep in all by yourself, and I'll give you 14 cents to boot. What do you think of that? Jack says, that sounds like a deal. And the next morning, Jack, with 2 meals inside him and a good night's sleep and 14 cents in his shoe, started walking down the road again. And he walked, and he walked, and he walked until he come to a town. And in that town, he saw a house. And that was one time, that must have been the most beautiful house in town. But that house, ain't been painted for a long time. The shingles falling off the roof and looking terrible. But it had a big sign in front of it. It said, if you can stay one night in this house, it and 40 acres is yours. Well, Jack, he hunted up the fellow that owned that house. He said, mister, I'd like to stay in your house if you don't mind. Oh, well, Jack, you certainly seem to be a nice boy, and I wouldn't advise it. See, many's a man gone in that house and ain't come out in morning. And Jack said, well, I'd like to give it a try. Very well then, here's the keys. And Jack, he put some victuals in his tater sack, and he went into that house. And right there, he went into the parlor, and right by the chimney, there was a table and some chairs. He sat down and he pulled that food out of his sack and he started to eat. He hadn't been eating long. A little bit of soot comes down the chimney, and then a little more, and then a little more. And then there's a screeching, and there's a howling, and there's a yelling, and a screaming, and the most hellacious kind of noise you've ever heard. And boom, 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 13 little red devils come right down out of that chimney. And they all come, and they all sat down around the table. And the meanest, nastiest, horriblest one of them all sat right down beside Jack. And he looked up at Jack, and he grinned. With a grin that looked like a fox eating chicken guts out of a wire brush. And he reached down and he pulled out a deck of cards and he put it on the table. He said, "You play cards, Jack." Jack says, "Well, played some go fishing in the army." "What you gonna play poker tonight, Jack?" And he picked up the cards and he shuffled them. And he dealt them. And everyone put a penny in the pot. Jack lost. That little devil, he dealt again. Jack lost again. And Jack lost again. And it went on and on and on into the night until he had one penny left of that 14 cents. And Jack said, "Give me them cards." And he dealt a hand and he won. He dealt another hand and he won again. And into the night he played and he played his hand so well that almost at dawn he won not just all of his 14 cents, but he won all the money off them other little devils. Now he was pulling that money to him. And then the meanest devil of them all looked up at him. And every single one of them up at him, showing their teeth like they was going to eat parts of him. And he said, "That's enough of that!" Kicked over the table, picked up his sack, said, "Devils, we can be whacked into my sack." And boom, 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 boom. Then 13 little red devils went right down to the sack. He pulled the drawstring closed. He threw it over in a corner, giving it a couple of kicks, and he sang Methodist hymns at it till dawn. He was on his 14th chorus, "Shall we gather Big river where white angel beat a big trod. When the man who owned that house come in through the door. And he had two other men with him, and they had a coffin. They took one look at Jack, and that coffin went boom on the floor. And the man who owned the house said, "Jack, what you doing alive?" And Jack told him about them 13 little red devils. They picked up that sack, and they went down to the blacksmith's shop, and the blacksmith got his longest tongs and his longest hammer, because when you sup with the devil, you got to use a long spoon. And he took every single one of them devils and beat them into dust. And took all that dust, put it in another bag, and took it down to the churchyard and buried it there. And didn't that dust howl to be buried in hallowed ground? Well, Jack got himself that house. And he settled down. He done some light farming for a while. Then he got the wanderlust. So one day, he picked up his sack, and he picked his blue glass drinking glass up, and he started to walk. And he walked, and he walked, and he walked, and he walked, till he come to a kingdom. And in that kingdom there was a king. And that king had a daughter. And she's ailing. She is terribly sick. Jack knew this because he saw an edict on the wall. And that edict read, "Any doctor who can cure the king's daughter will have her hand in marriage and have the kingdom." And then in little print down below, "And if you try to cure her and you don't, you're going to be beheaded." Well, Jack figured he'd give that a try. So he went to the king's house. And he found out the king was rolling in doctor's heads by that time. And he knocked on the door. And the king, he looked out the upstairs window and says, "Who are you?" "Me? I'm Jack." "What you want?" I come to cure your daughter." "You a doctor, boy?" "Me? No, I'm just a soldier." "Well, you know you try to cure my daughter, you don't, you're going to get beheaded." "Is that my problem or yours?" Well, the king couldn't answer that. So he brought Jack up into his daughter's room. Now, I know some of you just had dinner a little while ago, so I ain't going to describe anything about that malady she had. I will not give you any of the details. I will not tell you about all that green pus that's coming out of all the pores, making a great big puddle underneath. I ain't going to tell you how her eyes is all shriveled up like little raisins and just kind of hanging loose inside her head. I ain't going to tell you how that room smelled like a river full of dead dogs. I am not going to give you any of those details because I am going to spare your sensibilities. Jack, he turned to the king and pulled out his blue glass drinking glass. And he said, "You got a pump in your backyard?" And the king said, "Yes, I do." "You fill this 3/4 half full of water for me?" The king said, "Yes, I will." And the king come back with that glass. Jack looked at that girl through, and then blubbers went straight to the bottom. That girl was dying. She was dying right then. And if Jack didn't do anything about it, he's going to die too. So there's only one thing he could do. He reached down and he picked up his sack. And he said, "Death! Death! Wicky whack in my sack." All the sickness and all that green pus and all that river full of dead dog smell that I didn't tell you about, it all went down inside that sack. And it didn't weigh nothing. Jack put the sack over to the side. And there, sitting there on the bed, was a beautiful girl. She's sitting up and she's being pretty and everything. And she saw her father and said, "Hello, Dad." "Hello, daughter." "Who's that?" "That's Jack. You're going to marry him." "Oh, that's nice. Hi, Jack." And Jack, he married that king's daughter. And he got half the kingdom. He got to live in the king's house. And he settled down, done some light farming. He had a good life. He lived a long time. Long time. long, 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 long time. One morning, Jack, he got up, go for a walk. Weren't quite as easy as it was before. He was feeling tired, but he still walked down the road. And coming around the corner, he heard a kind of a moaning and a groaning, well, he didn't have the energy to go to it, so he just waited until it come to him. And coming around the corner, he saw an old woman with a cane here and a cane here, except everything in between was sagging. And she's walking, and she's crying and moaning, and Jack comes up, he says, "What seems to be the trouble, grandmother?" And she looks up at him, and she says, "I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm all stretched out like, I'd like to lay down and die, but I can't." "You can't? What do you mean you can't? Don't you know? Some dang fool gone tied death up in a bag. Ain't nobody died around here for the longest time." And Jack, he went home, pushed open the gate. There's a kind of a blob of a thingy there, and he's lying there going like this. He said, "Morning, King." When he put death in that bag, he give it to a boy, give that bag to a boy, and give him a nickel, and send him out in the king's backyard. And that boy climbed the poplar tree in the king's backyard, and he tied that bag up there in the tree. And he looked up at that bag hanging there. Well, go get that boy. That boy was 108 years old when he climbed that tree. So he got that boy's great-grandson. Give him $50, inflation. And that boy climbed that tree. And he found that bag way up there in the top branches, and let go of that bag, and it fell. And Jack, he reached down, and he pulled the drawstrings of that bag and opened it. And out come death. And the very first person that death took was Jack. And that's the end of Jack in that story.
For those of you who were in my storytelling class, I hope you saw some of the stuff I was talking about. Some of those things that we hopefully worked on. So we have here fruit, which we're demonstrating, and chocolate, and that's for all of you. So if you want some, help yourself. And there is a raffle happening. You guys not only are going to get amazing stories, but you're going to get stuff. How cool is that? Now, if you have got a raffle ticket, see the beautiful young lady over there? That's my lady. That's Cat Ellen. And my name is Drew Thomas. For those of you who just got here. So, a long time ago, there was a coffee house called Eagles. And it was in North Hollywood. And we were trying to do something crazy. We were trying to have storytelling, honest to God, traditional storytelling and folk arts in Hollywood. And I have to tell you, that's actually a pretty challenging thing, because you've got 50 million people there who want to be improv They want to be comedians, they want to be rock bands, you name it, every other thing, and more theater groups than you could beat with a stick. And somehow, the lady star who owned the place said, yeah, go for it. You can have Thursday nights at Eagles. And there was another side to the coffee house, and inside that other room was a bunch of beat up furniture and a little tiny riser. Well, it wasn't too, it was actually, you know, pretty high. And I was lucky enough that day to be, my friend John Hughes had heard of a storyteller called Michael D. McCarty. And I had no idea what Michael was like. And the beautiful thing about that beat up old furniture and the coffee house next door is it was the best place to just sit there and eat some, eat some Rice Krispie bars and drink some coffee, and then, you know, watch the performances. It was like being in your home. And then this gentleman right here, Michael D. McCarty, came up and he introduced himself, much like he's going to introduce himself. And he performed, and he even jumped off the stage and onto my table. And what I didn't realize was, A, that I would follow this man through hell or high water. I was going to help him with many, many endeavors. But also that he was going to become a very good friend. And when I got a chance to introduce the people here at Wyrd Con and storytelling, I said, I want the masters of storytelling. And I was very lucky to be blessed with two of them as friends. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Michael D.
How y'all doing? Now, a lot of people would say, oh, that's so nice, and I just say, it's all true. And I have no humility, but I'm going to tell you all, I'm going to tell you two stories. The first story that I'm going to tell you is an African-American folk tale. It's one of my favorites to tell. How many of you have ever heard of a character named High John the Conqueror? Okay, just the few who know. It's up to me to educate you. High John stories are stories that were told during slavery times in this country. But unlike the Brer Rabbit type stories that were told generally, the High John stories were only told amongst the slaves themselves. They used to say of High John, he wouldn't pick cotton, he wouldn't bale hay. He wouldn't take a beating, but he wouldn't run away. You see, John was a trickster, and he was usually tricking old master. Well, it was the day before Christmas, and every year at Christmas, John had a task to prepare the Christmas turkey for old master and his family. Now, John is a trickster kind of guy. Like I said, he's usually tricking old master. Old master and his family, they be eating possum. And that turkey would end up in John's belly. Old master was getting tired of getting tricked, so he decided he was going to trick John. So he called him to him that day before Christmas and said, John, yes sir, master, you going to fix that Christmas turkey? Oh yeah, master, I'm going to fix that turkey. Well, John, we're doing something different this year. Whatever you do to that turkey, we going to do to you. Uh-oh, he thought. If I pluck that turkey's feathers, he'll skin me alive. And if I chop off that turkey's head, ultimate haircut. But John was quick and wit and came up with a plan. Christmas Day. Old master and his family, they all sitting out on the porch. They all in on this joke on John. Here comes John down the road with that turkey, feathers and head intact. Master says, John, yes sir, master. You gonna fix that turkey? Yes sir, master. But let me see if I got this here right. Whatever I do to this here turkey, y'all, all y'all gonna do to me? That's right, John. What you gonna do? Well, master will show you. John, pick that turkey up, set it up on the table. Grab that turkey by the tail feathers, raise those tail feathers up and kissed it smack dab in the ass. Then he turned to old master, pulled up his coattails, and got dressed up for this. Y'all take your time now. I ain't going nowhere. And that's the end of that. So, I'm going to give you an option. Personal story, another folk tale.
Personal.
Okay, personal wins. Here we go. This is a story that I call McNeil. Now, I grew up in Chicago back in the 60s, and I was a Boy Scout. I will do my best. Oh, yeah. Troop 298. And what is one of the things that Scouts do? Scouts go camping. And even in Chicago, we would go camping at some forest preserve. It was the summer. We might be gone for a week or so. If it was during the school year, we would leave Friday after school, come back late Sunday afternoon, early evening. This was one of those school times. Around October, not too far from Halloween. Our scoutmaster, Mr. Dixon, used to be a drill sergeant. So he wanted to make us tough. So we went out to the forest preserve. Friday night we'd get set up, do a little bit, but the main day was Saturday. So we get up early, fix our breakfast, and then we waited for Mr. Dixon and the senior scouts to come and lead us in the day's activity. Now Mr. Dixon and the senior scouts were all in this humongous tent. I mean, it was like as big as this from this area to the wall. And so we're standing off like on the other side of that wall from where that tent is, and all of a sudden, we see Mr. Dixon and most of the senior scouts come busting out the tent. The last person coming out the tent was one of the Explorer Scouts, McNeil. And this is how he came out that tent. You see, whenever we went camping, the only thing he took to eat was pork and beans. And I'm not even talking Campbell's pork and beans. I'm talking no brand pork and beans. He ate pork and beans for breakfast. He ate pork and beans for lunch. He ate pork and beans for dinner. And we wanted a snack, he ate pork and beans. But we still weren't quite sure what had happened. But it took less than 10 seconds to find out. In less than 10 seconds after they bust out that tent, we realized that McNeil had released the stankiest, the funkiest, the most turlacious fart that had ever been released in the history of Scoutdom. In less than 10 seconds, McNeil had cleared the entire campsite. The great outdoors wasn't great no more. Now, how do you think Mr. Dixon felt about this? He was a bit perturbed. But he didn't let on how perturbed he was. Now, as I mentioned, Mr. Dixon liked to make us tough, so whenever we went camping, at least one night, in this case on Saturday night, he would take us hiking through the local graveyard around midnight. Now, we're marching along and we're trying to be tough. Somebody had hung a white towel up in a tree to dry and it looked like a... We're marching through the graveyard, We get about halfway through the graveyard. Mr. Dixon gives us a signal, halt! He looks at the senior scouts and gives them a sign. They go and grab McNeil. They take McNeil and they put him up against a tree and they lash him to that tree in the middle of the graveyard. Now, how do you think McNeil felt about this? I'm sorry, Mr. Dixon! No! And they lashed him to the tree and finished it off with them good Boy Scout knots. We got back in formation, Mr. Dixon, don't leave me! And we forward, hood! And we started marching away. And as we were marching away, Mr. Dixon, don't leave me! I'm sorry! Mr. Dixon, don't leave me! I'm sorry! Until we couldn't hear him at all. Now, Mr. Dixon wasn't going to leave him there all night. He just wanted to put the fear of God into him. He was going to send somebody back to get him. But after we'd been marching for a while, all of a sudden we heard, Mr. Dixon, This is the Scouts Honor Truth. Here comes McNeil, running down the road, still lashed to that tree. He had ripped that tree up out the ground. And when he got to us, blam, he fell out. And we fell out laughing. We fell out laughing. Woo! And guess what McNeil did not bring the next time we went camping? And that's the end of that. Now, I need at least one, maybe two volunteers. Okay, you, and you, and you, and you. Okay, 4. Let me have the 4 of y'all come up. Now, I'm going to be raffling off some books and some things. And among the things that I'm going to be raffling off is what I call a story bag. In this bag, there are a variety of miscellaneous objects. And my volunteers, you're not going to look, you're going to reach in and grab something. Okay. Now, yeah, actually I had to make sure it did. I had to use it for it didn't work because I didn't. If I put it in the school and people set the thing on fire. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell a story that involves the thing that you pulled out of the bag. Now, the thing that you pulled out of the bag can be anything that you want it to be. It is not limited to what it is or what you think it is or what it might actually be. And you'll have about 2 minutes to tell your story. Who wants to be first? Okay, you know.
Okay. So, this is Charlie. Charlie is a lizard. My brother caught him. My brother used to catch lizards a lot. And when he caught this particular lizard, he thought it would be a good idea to dress him up in my Barbie doll's t-shirt. And so he did that, and Barbie also had a little hat. So now the lizard was not overly thrilled with this style of dress. And he kept trying to get away, and he kept trying to get away, and of course my brother was holding on to him, but lizards are kind of slippery, and what my brother should have done is hold on to him by the shirt once he had the shirt on, but no, he was holding on to him by the body, and the lizard got away. Lizard's running across the house wearing a shirt and a hat, and the cat saw the lizard. Now, cats do a whole different thing with lizards. They don't dress them up. I guess you could say they undress them in a way. So the cat's chasing the lizard, my brother's chasing the lizard, and my mother walks in. Now, my mother doesn't like lizards. She really, really doesn't like lizards. And you're not supposed to have a cat in the house either, because when I grew up, the cat was outside. We violated that rule all the time, but it was still the rule. And of course, my brother's running after the lizard. My mother goes, "Ah! Why is that lizard in the house? And why is it wearing a shirt?" And so a little chaos ensued. My mother got a broom. She got a broom, swept the lizard out the door with my Barbie doll shirt and my Barbie doll's hat. Everything's out the door. Swept the cat out the door too. I have no idea where the lizard, the Barbie doll shirt, or the hat ended up. The cat seemed very happy.
I have an Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob is insane. Now, you know, we all have that uncle that's a little eccentric. No, Uncle Bob is legitimately insane. He was, back in the day, back in the 80s maybe, he was a successful businessman. He was very, 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 very rich. Nobody in the family ever saw a dime of that money because he hoarded it like somebody who hoards things. Now recently, Uncle Bob has been having some heart troubles for Uncle Bob. He had a few heart surgeries, and we're all very worried. But none of us were more so worried than Uncle Bob. He figured out how to use the internet, and he would Google heart problems and tell us all about them, about what he should do now to solve these heart problems. And until one day, he decided he was worried he wouldn't be able to get to the hospital close soon enough. The hospital was about 3 blocks away. And so he bought an ambulance. It's difficult to buy an ambulance. When Uncle Bob figured out how to buy an ambulance, it turns out an independent hospital in another county was shutting down, and Uncle Bob managed to buy one of their old ambulances with all the sirens and everything. So he thought he would park the ambulance right on his lawn, so that way when he had any heart troubles, he could drive himself to the hospital without any traffic to worry about. Now, he had heart problems for many years, but he kept plugging along. His money eventually dwindled, and he had to sell his cars. Now, when it came to an option between selling his very sensible Volkswagen Beetle or the ambulance, he sold the Beetle. So he kept the ambulance as his only car. He would go to the groceries with his ambulance. He would go everywhere with his ambulance. He picked himself from school with the ambulance, which was interesting. So one day we actually went camping with the ambulance, which was very fun. Now, up in the mountains somewhere, we were camping, and just as we were setting up our tents and whatnot, one guy in the next campsite over started having a heart attack. And so they were screaming and shouting. This was before people had cell phones on them a lot. I was just a little kid. Somebody call 911, somebody call 911. As Uncle Bob said, well, I didn't say it, but you could tell by the look in his eye, this is my time to shine. So he came over in the ambulance, turned on the sirens with a little 500-yard hop to the next campsite over, and he said, I have an ambulance, I'm with the hospital. Let's get the ambulance, let's get you to the hospital. He said, oh, thank you. They didn't realize it. Well, he's just an old guy, I'm not sure why. He had an ambulance, sure. What type of person has an ambulance who's in the hospital? So they got in the ambulance. All strapped them down because it came with all the gurneys and whatnot. And Uncle Bob zoomed down the trail, zoomed down the road, and then eventually he pulled into what looked like an ambulance station at a hospital, and he pulled him out, we got the gurneys, like, oh, we got a guy with a heart attack here. I'm sorry, sir, this is a police station? Are you looking for the hospital? It's down the street. And so they took the guy to the hospital. Uncle Bob didn't say much, and then he sold the ambulance.
Thank you, sir. Ladies first.
Oh, did you want to first or second?
He said ladies first.
Ladies first.
All right, so I was born and raised in Alaska. Beautiful country, very harsh country. My grandfather grew up and has a house by a lake, and we would spend every summer there. Now, it's one of those things, very picturesque. You can sit there and you see the trees there and there's the water. It's one of those, it should be on a greeting card. Every summer there's swans there. And eventually, my grandfather acquired a jet ski. Now, he's got some friends of his who come over and they all sit around the fire and they drink and they tell the old stories of the things they did when they were young and dumb. And I'm sitting there and I'm taking my younger brothers and sisters out for jet ski rides. And my grandpa's best friend, who was his next door neighbor, fairly big guy, very drunk this day, decides he wants to go on a ride. Now, everyone else is going, no, we're not taking you out on the lake. You're drunk. We're not going to deal with this. But he's sitting there, I want to go for a ride, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you know what, I'll shut you up. I'll take you for a ride. But they're going to put on the life vest first. And he kind of hemmed and hawed. I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. I was like, I'm not going to take you for a ride unless you put on a life vest because accidents happen and we could get. Because, it's a jet ski. It's maybe a little bit more than that long. And I'm tiny, he's not. So eventually he does put on a life vest. And I tell him, leave your cell phones, leave your cigarettes, leave your wallets. No, you're not going to tip me. You wouldn't do that. I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. That wasn't that long ago. And he's like, no, I'll just take it all with me. She's like, okay. So I get out there, we get on the jet ski, and I'm taking him around, and it's fairly uneventful for the most part because I'm not going to be going at breakneck speed with a drunk man on the back of the jet ski most of the time. And we go to turn around to go back. And for whatever reason, he decides to lean the opposite direction of where we were turning. and capsizes the jet ski out in the middle of the lake. And the jet ski almost flips completely upside down. And if it did, we would have been stuck out there forever while Grandpa tried to ripcord his boat open and get out there to save us. But luckily it didn't. So we got it uprighted and got back on there. And everybody on land just hooting and hollering, going, "Oh, she dumped you, ha ha ha!" Because they'd all been drinking around the fire like we do every year. And we get back to land, and he's laughing. He's having a merry old time, you know, he's kicking it up, and he goes to reach for his cigarette pack, and he goes to pull out a cigarette, and all he gets is a butt. And he looks at it, kind of tosses it away, and goes to grab another one, and the same thing happens. And you can see the very tiny spark of the thought of, wait, as he tips his cigarette controller, and out pours water and tobacco stained stuff, and he throws a fit as he tosses his cigarette pack to the ground. He starts to round on me, and everybody's like, "Nope, she warned you." And he's just like, and stomps off and throws his little hissy fit. And the rest of the day I spent kicking my family out, and most of them behaved.
Alright, so first thing you gotta understand, back when I was a kid, we lived back on this huge ranch, and it was bone dry during the summer. Bone dry. All the brush turned to fire. Half the time, because some dude didn't know how to put out a cigarette, but you know, usually self-contained, but just more on that later. So, when I was young, I had this little squirt of a brother, about 3. He had a pig nose like this, always saying, "What are we gonna do?" And I was like, "I don't know. Why are you looking at me?" I was only 9 at the time, so we go out and we play with bottles and cans, and you know, we use our little slingshots and try to knock them off the fence, but it got boring after a while. So one time we went back to the local convenience store, and we got one of these light sliders. And you know, we were good every once in a while. Dad would take us out back. We would take the matches, line them up, watch them burn. It's kind of fun. He liked it more than I did. So finally, one night, Mama put it on top of the refrigerator. Brother looked up at me and said, "We should go out and play with it." And I was like, "That's a bad idea." And he looked up at me, "No, it's not." And I was like, "Yes, it is." And so finally, after cajoling and me trying to go to sleep, I was like, "All right, we take it out for 5 minutes, and then you shut the heck up, and then we go back to sleep." And he's like, "Okay." So we take it out back, we look at it, and back then I used a light. And so we look at it, we're like, "Oh," and he looked, "You want to burn something?" And I'm like, "No." And he looks at me, "Yeah, you do." And I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of do." So we got a little bit out back so we don't, you know, let Mom and Pop see out the window and stuff. So we go out, we lean down, we find this nice little brush, and that's contained far away from anything else. And we look at it. We're like, "You ready?" "Yeah." All hell broke loose. Immediately, goes up like wildfire, starts spreading everywhere. We go running back to the house. We go shaking the bed. "Mom, Pop, yo, wake up!" They look at us, they look out the window, they go, "Oh, Lord," and they get out there, buckets of water, they start putting it out. Half our ranch burned. Took an entire year to grow back that entire side of the field. And that's the story about how we burned half of it.
Give them a hand. Give them all a hand. Okay, so we're
Did I
done.
miss anyone with the...
Everybody got a ticket? Everybody got a
Did I miss
ticket?
anyone? Well, I thought maybe one of you guys.
This might be the lucky winning.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call a number, and you have an option. You may come up here, and you may have either a story bag or one of the books that's up here, and a bookmark that goes along with it. I'll leave it to you, but do it quickly. Are we ready? Everybody's got a thingamajiggy? All right, cool. I love to give away stuff.
Mixing.
Mixing.
Oil. No cutlasses.
Alrighty. First number, I'm going to read the last three numbers. 778.
Woo!
All right. 781.
There we go.
All right. 786. All right. Back in the cheap seats. 780. I'm going to do two more, and then we'll do the rest at the end or somewhere. 784.
Okay.
All right, yay! 785! You're welcome. All right, more to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Michael D. McCarty.
All right, Jay.
So, one of the ideas of the Masters of Storytelling class was, during the day, we've been seeing all sorts of classes on storytelling and the power of storytelling and how to use storytelling effectively. Well, these two guys do it all day long. They use storytelling, that's their livelihood. And they do it at the most essential level, person to person. So what I thought was, wouldn't it be cool to get a couple of the people who are fantastic storytellers and ask them some questions about storytelling. So I'll ask the first couple of questions, and I would like you guys to think of some storytelling questions you'd like to ask. So the first question I'd like to ask you two is, what does storytelling mean to you?
Well, there's my elevator speech that I give before I start a performance, and that is that this is the oldest art form. Before we could do anything else, we told stories. And actually, I'll tell a little story. I used to belong to a Buddhist sangha that met at the basement of a metaphysical bookstore in Pasadena, Alexandria too. And I would remember sitting there, and I get monkey-minded, so I'm sitting there meditating, trying to empty my mind, and for some reason the Jamaican bobsled team keeps coming into my head. Get out of here, you guys, I'm trying to meditate. But afterwards we would talk about how well, you know, what happened to us and how good our meditation was. And one fellow was talking not so much about the meditation, but about what had happened to him that day. He had an altar at home, and the altar for some reason had fallen off the wall, and he first was angry and then got the materials together to rebuild it and rededicate it. And after he finished talking about rededicating the altar, he said, you know, it wasn't until I started talking about this that I realized how important that altar was to me, and how I had rededicated my own spirituality in putting that altar back together. And I realized then that nothing in and of itself has meaning. What happens to us through our lives and all the facts that we deal with are meaningless until we put them into a narrative. And stories are how we take details and weave them into something that actually makes sense. So that's pretty much what storytelling is to me. It's about putting things together and making them make sense.
Mr. Michael D.
My mother was my storyteller. I can remember till I was two. When I was two, from the time I was two, my mother telling me, reading me stories. And storytelling was just a part of my life. When I was in high school in the 60s, I discovered all these things about Black history and culture that hadn't been in anybody's history book, and I started telling stories and sharing stories about those things. 1992, I met this guy, Joel and Izzy, who was introduced to me as a professional storyteller. I said, what? People pay you to tell stories? How you do that? And I decided to be a storyteller. My second wife left me because she thought I had lost my damn mind. You gonna do what? We gonna starve. Bye. And there were times when I thought that she was perhaps right. And then 92, 93, I was at a funeral of a friend here in LA. After the funeral, people were gathering and talking, and I saw this person standing off to the side. Now, I'm somebody, if I make eye contact with you, I'll speak to you. So I see this guy, and I said, well, let me introduce myself. We had a mutual friend. And I started walking towards him. He says, what's your name? I said, Michael McCarty. He said, you're from Chicago. I said, yeah. He said, you went to St. Finbar, the elementary school that I'd been to that had been torn down millennia ago. Well, he had gone to the same school. He was 4 years behind me. And in 1969, March 1969, just after I'd gotten kicked out of high school for leading a walkout in my senior year, his 8th grade teacher, who had been my 8th grade teacher, asked me to come and talk to her class about what was going on, civil rights movement, black power movement, and I went and told stories. And he proceeded to tell me how the stories that I told him that day had impacted his life and the life of several of his classmates. And I knew that I was doing the right thing.
Awesome.
I have a similar story to Michael's. I was at the, what's the name of the coffee place in Pasadena, the Ice House?
Leslie's place?
Yeah.
No, the Ice House was a comedy club. I did keep talking to the
Right. So I was doing a show there. I was performing.
Coffee Gallery.
The Coffee Gallery. I was performing at the Coffee Gallery, and I'm outside, and you know, I just done half the storytelling for the evening, and I was performing with Dinah LaHoven, who's a brilliant, fantastic harpist, and playing this gorgeous wire-strung harp. You know, it was one of those things you just, it's like being on drums. So anyhow, I told a couple traditional stories, and I'm, you know, signing some stuff, and this lady walks up, and she's gorgeous. Wow. I love your stories. I love that you love my stories. And then another older woman walks up, and she said, yes, she loved you ever since she was 5 or 6 when you came and told stories in our tent at Ojai Mud Fair. And I went, oh, damn. Yep, you came into that tent and it was cold and wet and raining, and you told stories all night long. And she sat there in my arms and listened to your stories, and ever since then she's loved stories. I went, thank you so much. I feel incredibly old. So I'm going to ask you guys another question. The question is this, but don't answer just yet. Hell gig. Hell gig. What are your worst hell gigs? Okay? But first, let's take a question from our viewing audience. Who has a question for our amazing storytellers?
So, in your case, and possibly in your case as well, I think the stories you were telling are from folklore, right?
Yes.
So, where did you find these stories? And the question's for both of you. Where did you find them?
Well, as I said, the story that I told was collected, and I'm sure it had been collected other places, but it was included in Jimmy Neal Smith's book, Homespun. But there are many different versions of that story, and there are different variations. I do, and these guys do too, have walls of storytelling books. You know, just I've got an entire bookcase of them that's spilled over into my other bookcase. Pantheon publishers put out the Pantheon Storytelling Library. And you can find, if you go into a decent bookstore, and I'm sure that, you know, from online, I've got, say for example, I've got books of African stories, I've got books of Arabian stories, I've got a really nice book of Yiddish stories that was collected by Yivo just on the eve of the Holocaust. The first big book I ever got, it was my 10th birthday. My mom had sent off to Life magazine, and I got a book and a record. The Life magazine collection of American folk tales, and the Life magazine Treasury of American Folk Music. And so that was my first LP album. So one of the, I'm walking along and Gene Bluestein singing Scada at America. And it's all part of the joy of being raised as a dork. But the books are there. And I suggest a good place to start is Jane Yolen's Favorite Folk Tales from Around the World. That is probably a good seminal volume to begin with. But if you go to the 300 section of the library, there are good selections there. Langston Hughes collected back in the 20s Afro-American folklore. And there are bunches and bunches of collections of folk tales. And of course, the best way to get it, I'm one of the few white kids that got La Llorona the right way. Some Mexican kid told it to me in the lunchroom and scared the crap out of me. Anybody know what La Llorona is? No. Oh boy, we got a ample audience here. La Llorona is the Mexican version of Medea. She was a beautiful woman who, and I think this Carlos Fuentes, I think, wrote a novel about it. She was a beautiful woman who married a rich ranchero, but after a while she started to get a little gray around the gills, and he left her and so forth. And then she saw him take up with another woman, and she became so angry that she drowned her 2 sons, and then realized that she had done this and came to her senses and ran down the river chasing them, saying, mis hijos, and fell and hit the back of her head, at least in the story I heard, hit the back of her head on a stone and died, but now her ghost shows up. And don't go out at night, Mino, because she's out there, and if she sees you, she's going to ground you, and just leave her alone. And every single Latino neighborhood has the La Llorona story, if it's an older neighborhood. Whether it's in Mexico, Guatemala, or in Gonzales, Arizona, south of Phoenix. And it always happened right over there. So the best way really is to get it from other people.
It's interesting, as storytellers, we kind of evolved before internet was like the massive search engine. YouTube was available. You could reach into the Smithsonian archives with just a Google inquiry. And so that's one of the reasons why we have these massive walls of books, is because it was really hard to find this stuff. And once you found that one story, that book was in your library forever. And so, now sadly, when our comrades pass away, there's kind of this moment of everybody looks around and says, please God save the books.
Yes.
And so Bill, hopefully, and Mike will be there to help take care of my books when I shuffle off this mortal coil, because I got a lot of books.
But the first story, the folktale that I told, High John the Conqueror, I heard from a storyteller, a Coney the Storyman, who was living in Santa Barbara. I heard that story in 1992 at a benefit concert for the Aquarium bookstore that had been burned down during the riots, put together by a friend of ours, a great friend of ours, Leslie Perry, who just passed away.
Yeah.
And so I heard Coney tell that story, and then I found it in a collection. And then you put your own little on it, okay? So we have these massive libraries. We're always reading, we're always listening to storytellers. I go to storytelling festivals or what have you. They're everywhere, they're everywhere.
But you did characters too, so you didn't just tell the story, you acted the stories. How do you figure out, I'm sorry, this is the second question, but I know that anyway. How do you figure out what the right voice is.
It's organic. For me, it's organic. I don't figure it out. One day I'm telling the story, all of a sudden this voice comes out of my mouth. Or some kind of voice. Something happens. It just comes. Which is why I don't memorize stories. A lot of people, I don't know. You all memorize? Do you memorize?
But I gotta do a lot of technicals.
Yeah, I don't memorize stories. I visualize a story and I tell it, and I see, I'm sometimes just as surprised at what comes out of my mouth. For instance, in the story that I told you, I have this line about old Max and his family, they be eating possum. That happened one day. I wasn't in the story for years. And then one day I'm telling the story and I'm watching it come out of my mouth. I'm like, wow, that's good. I hope I remember it.
I've got to add to that. I thought you were raising your hand.
Sorry.
When I've taught about telling stories, I've likened it to going to your friend's house. The first time you go to your friend's house, you're looking at the directions and hopefully not getting into an automobile accident as you're looking at that. And everything is about the directions. And as you become more and more familiar with the story, then the details start to appear. The detail of the girl sitting up in bed in Soldier Jack saying, "Who's that? That you're going to marry him." "Oh, that's not Dad." That showed up a couple of years ago when I was telling that story. Just like that, just like you said. And it just started to happen. And for me, it's also, I find, I can't rehearse a story by myself. I gotta tell the story to somebody. And it's within the telling that the story tends to grow. Also, when I go to a story and the first thing I try to do is not memorize anything from the retelling that I found in the book. Just empty that sucker out and just make sure that I have the basic structure of the story. I've likened this to verbal jazz. And within a jazz piece, you've got the basic chord structure of the tune and so forth, but then the players improvise as they go, so that every jazz piece that you hear, if they're doing it right, it's not going to be the same way that they did the last time.
Now, there are some storytellers who you can set your clock by. There's a storyteller, Wolf Foss, who I swear you could put him on a pedestal and spin him slowly, and he would be just like a Disney automaton. He will deliver that story with exactly the same beats, measures, and everything every time.
But he does it well.
And he does it well. It's a great story, but it's like, how the heck do you do that? Is this live or is it Memorex?
Well, Leslie used to do that. Leslie would type out his story and get that sucker memorized before he would come up. And we used to, you performed with Leslie, didn't you?
Many times.
We drove him nuts. He'd be sitting there looking at us and, well, how can you do that? And he had to have it down and memorized. Everybody's going to be different.
You had questions?
Well, it kind of tied into that one. I was just wondering about the process from the first time you read a story to when you're on stage performing it for an audience. There's steps in there. I figure there's definitely steps where you're, haranguing family members to listen to your story. I'm just wondering what that process is. How long, do you say it out loud to yourself?
Depends on the type of story. Let's say folktale, personal story, historical story. That's 3 examples. So the folktale, for me, I go over the story, I read the story till I see it in my mind. And then I start telling it. And then because I said, don't memorize, I just tell it from what I see in my mind. And the story is alive and grows because of that. So that's the folktale.
But hang on, sorry, when you say I start telling it, do you just wing it in front of your first audience? Do you do it with family members? Do you do it in front of a mirror?
I tell it to people. Because I go to, especially when I first began 22 years ago as doing it as a profession, there are all these storytelling groups here in Southern California and all over the country and around. So let's say there were half a dozen storytelling groups. I was in all of them. Telling the stories. Yeah. So that's the folktale. The historical story is a story where I research, I put together, for me, I put together a list of facts that have to be in the story. And then I look at them and I start telling to determine what the order is going to be. And it'll change. It'll change. Sometimes you tell it looks good on paper. And this is different between something that's written and something that's told. It looks good on paper, but it sucks when you're telling it. So you may have to make some adaptation. Same thing with personal stories. There's a story that I do about my daughter called That's My Baby, which now has become one of my signature stories. When I first started telling the story, I had another story within the body of that story, but it just didn't work. So I took that out and made that a separate story. And for me, again, some people who write, that's how they determine. For me, it's in the telling that I know that ain't working.
It's going to be different for every single. I don't think I've met two storytellers that have the exact same process. Before you leave, by the way, I've got a handout here that has a couple of very similar processes. As a matter of fact, I will say this. RJ, will you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you pass these out for me?
Well, we're going to do a little bit more of the raffle.
What I would like to do is, I'd like to show you at least this thing here.
Okay.
This was created by a lady, this bit here, the storyboard was created by a lady in the Bay Area that I met several years ago named Evelyn Forrester for a thing called word weaving. That was for teachers. And I do find this very useful. I will block out the story into sections. For example, in Soldier Jack, you've got the section with the old man, first old man, second old man, the turkeys, the inn, the haunted house, and etc., all the way down there. Instead of trying to get the whole thing down in one piece, it's far easier to put it into pieces. And on this, so here is just the reminder to myself of what is in that piece. Over here, though, I might want to put down phrases that need absolutely to be memorized. Wicky-whack in my sack. Some things don't need to be memorized. Some things do. But that works pretty well. The other thing I would say, if you're preparing a story for telling, make sure that it fits in your mouth. I've tried some stories and they just didn't work. I just could not get, I couldn't make them part of me. And I had somebody come to me one time and say, we would like to do a storytelling thing and we'll tell you the stories we want you to do. I said, you're not going to get any storytellers doing that for you. That just ain't going to happen. Because it's got to come, if you make it yourself, it's got to be part of you. And if you can't do that, you can't put that into you, then you're not going to do a good job telling it.
A caveat. If they're paying, I'll tell the story.
You mercenary, you.
We want to do a couple more raffles because we want to keep you guys excited. That's right.
I'm lazy to sit here.
All right.
Actually, you can just.
Well, yeah, but if I do this, then it feels like I'm giving you.
See, you all missed the part where I told you I'm from Chicago. That meant that you should have put a $5 bill along with the little ticket here. That would guarantee the prize. But 788. All right.
Lovely bags, lovely books.
790. All right.
That's right. Come to the Masters of Storytelling and you get prizes.
774. All right. So, by the way, regarding the story bags, I call them story bag starter kits. I look for wacky stuff to go into the bags as well as normal stuff. But you'll find, you might see bones, you might, they're not actual bones, they're not anybody that you know, okay? Just so you know.
You got bones, did I hear you right? Why are you wondering for a second?
777.
That's me.
All right. See, what we got left over there, Drew?
Looks like 1 book and 3 bags.
Well, 2 bags, right?
And one new person who just walked in, so I'm gonna give her a raffle.
Okay, so we'll get another raffle ticket out, and we'll do the rest at the very end.
Okay. So, we got, I think, about 20 minutes left, so what I thought we would do real quick is I'm going to tell you some of the delightful things about being a professional storyteller. And one of the cool things about being a professional storyteller is every storyteller has their hell gig story. And so, lest you think that it was all, you know, posies and cake and happiness and warm snuggies, I thought maybe we would throw a little darkness out there.
I actually have an entire workshop, Storytelling Gigs from Hell, Coping with Crisis.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour workshop.
So,
Gigs from Hell.
I'm going to give you 2 of mine. The first one was really quick. I was hired to go and tell stories for the Ventura Law Enforcement Association. I get up there are 300 people in this room, judges, lawyers, and cops, sheriffs, all of them, you know, jailers, all this. I'm getting up there, I'm in costume, I'm going to tell stories about the Fianna, and I start going, and they all turn and look at me and give me the, can I see your driver's license and registration look? You have never met a deader pan audience in your entire life. I could not get one of those people to smile at me. They were, you know, it was the deadest. I was emotionally scarred for years. And at the end of it, I had been giving and giving and giving. I wasn't getting anything back. And I literally, they gave me an award, believe it or not. I still have it at home, but I have to tell you, you know, I personally think, oh my God, I sucked so bad. So that was hell gig number 1. But hell gig number 2 for me, I was at, in Orange County, and they said, True, we would like you to do some, it was for the Finn McCool Irish Festival. Could you do a Finn McCool story? So I went out and researched and created this Finn McCool story. And I was telling this Finn McCool story. I get out there, and they say, okay, you're going up around noon. And then the producer walks up to me and says, True, little addendum, we have to stop you in the middle of your gig, in the middle of your story, because that's at noon. And there were those kids who got shot in Colorado. And we're going to have a little memorial for them in the middle of your set. And I went, what? They said, yeah, and they're telling me this literally as I'm going on stage. And so, when it gets close to 12, we'll wave and you have to stop. And I went, okay, you do realize it's Orange County. There is no shade. I've got 50 or 60 pasty white Irish Celtic people sitting in plastic white lawn chairs in the hot noonday sun. It's like 90 degrees and 100% humidity. Okay. So I get out there, I start telling the story, I see this person frantically waving at me. I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, I have to stop at this moment because we have a memorial, and I'm handing you your remote control. Everybody got your remote control? Good. And I said, okay, now everybody hit the pause button. I walk off stage. 30 minutes later, after one maudlin politician and another gets up there and eulogizes these people they don't even know, talking about how horrible this situation is, I'm looking at my audience and they are just literally melting into the chairs. And they say, okay, and now we'll return you to your storyteller, Mr. True Thomas. And I look at these people, and in my mind, I want to say to them, run. You guys are dying of third-degree burns. You need to leave.
And I looked at them and, are you guys cool with this? And the audience, bless their damn hearts, said, we wanted to hear your story. We are staying for your story. You could have knocked me over with a feather. So I ran backwards onto the stage and I said, Finn McCool, blah, 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 blah. As I did the story, I started bringing them back. I said, now bring me forward, hit reverse, forward, fast forward. And I started running forward and I brought the story back up to speed. And I said, hit play. And everybody went, and I started the story again. I told that story. The audience looked at me and they said, they all stood up, and as they stood up, the chairs came up with them. I literally, it was, and they gave me a round of applause, and I swear to God, if I could have bought each and every one of those people a drink, I would have. So, there's my Hell Gig story.
Okay, which one to choose from? All right, here was a good one. Oh, God, that one too. Oh, I can tell you that one. Okay, here we go. It was 1999. I was doing this. I had 3 sites in Long Beach for this at-risk youth program. So the first day of the class, of the first site, I couldn't do because I just had surgery, so I asked a friend of mine to go in, who I scheduled to go, and he's going to go in. So I called him up later that day. I said, how'd it go? There was this dinosaur pregnant pause. And he said, it was interesting. And he told me he had gone in, this is Bob the Storyteller. He had gone in, and they said to him, who the F are you? Middle school, right? And so I go in, finally, I go in for the next session. And I walk in and this kid is cussing at me. And I said, get out. Get out. And then one day, one of the kids is sitting in front of me, biting his fingernails and spitting them towards me. I said, get out. Everybody leave. Because I'm about to kill some children. This is not good for your career. I said, everybody leave. So this kid, this kid comes back in. And he sits down in one of those desk chairs that aren't stationary, and I find myself walking towards him. And I said, you got something to say to me? I see myself killing this child. And he said, what you talking about? And I guess I started to get the crazy look. I said, you got something to say to me? He said, my bad. I said, I'm old school, that don't work for me. My bad. I grabbed the desk portion and I raised it up. At about 45 degrees, he saw the light. I'm sorry. Okay. I drove home screaming. I called my then fiance and said, I'm gonna kill these children. She says, baby, I'm not doing any conjugal business. You gotta come up with something else, and I came up with something else. Okay, that's one. And I'll give you, I have another one, but I'll give you a short one. I'm doing, you'll appreciate this, I'm doing a gig in Long Beach. I'm always early, very early, at least an hour, maybe more. I get there, it's a blazing hot day. They have me set up to perform on an open stage with no shade for me or my audience, and there are no chairs. There are no chairs. Kids might sit on the ground, but y'all ain't sitting on the ground in 90-degree heat. And if your kids are with you, they ain't gonna stay. And I had to tell them, okay, we going inside. And I'm gonna give you one half of another one. Don't let them know this is the same one. I was 40, 30, 40 feet from a fully amplified rock band. On top of the heat, no seats, no shade.
Oh,
first of all, I've got to say that I came into storytelling through that record I told you about. And when I was in the service, we had this wonderful station in Yokosuka, Japan. We had a huge tape library, all of these bootleg tapes of every record available. And I happened to find the Joan Baez ballad book and recordings of the Newport Folk Festival, and suddenly I became fond of English folk ballads. And then when I got back from the service, although this is the preamble, I went to the Pomona Public Library and found the old Riverside recordings of Ewan McCall and A.L. Lloyd doing the child ballads. And this is not for 20th century consumption. It was, again, just a kind of dork. I have never been into popular culture at all. And so, one of the first of these ballads that I learned is called Lying and Growing. I'll just give you a verse. The trees they are ivy, the leaves they are green. The times they had gone that we have seen in the lang winter snare. I'm a bonny laddie's lang a growing. Now you had some preamble for that. Did you like that? But at any rate, so I took I went to college at Cal State Fullerton, you know, Cal State Disneyland. And, oh, there's somebody there. So did James Cameron. Wonderful technician, crap scripts. I think Titanic would be so great if you got rid of Jack and Rose. I want to know about that Irish lady telling your kids about Tierna Dog. Tell me about her. Don't tell me about those fictional people. Anyway, boy, I just made friends.
That is Tierna Dog, you cannot beat that.
Yeah, exactly. That's when I cried.
I actually, growing up, before I found science fiction, the old mythos were my bread and butter.
Oh, yeah. And as long as I'm bagging on James Cameron, I did like Avatar. I also liked it when it was Dances with Wolves, and I liked it when it was Ferngully. Anyway.
It was a lot like Ferngully.
Yeah, it was a lot like Ferngully. Okay. So anyway, Cal State Fullerton, I happened to meet my mentor. And now, I do say this is not, storytelling is not storytelling, because ballads are verse narratives. That's what got me into storytelling, was these long, the meckle songs. That's what the Scots call them, the meckle songs. Meckle meaning big ass. And, 20 verses of these things. And the fellow who taught me about folk music at Cal State Fullerton is Bill Kuhn. A very irascible gentleman who also taught me banjo and Shakespeare. And at any rate, he said, yeah, you've got a really good traditional voice. And so we got ourselves a gig. I used to do gigs. I did gigging with him. But the first time I ever had a gig singing this stuff in front of anybody was at an international festival at Chapman College. And he said, why, sure, we could come down there and sing some of these things for you. And we drove down there, and I was really nervous. And he said, listen, Bill, I remember one time when I had a gig, it was down at Newport Beach, and I was playing bluegrass out in front of these people. They were throwing bottles and beer cans and all kinds of things, and making all kinds of nasty, horrible remarks and things. And every time I have a bad gig, I just think about that, and it gets better. So they put us in the student cafeteria at Chapman College. It was crowded as all hell. And they hadn't bothered to tell anybody that this was about the international festival they were having. It was just a platform with him and me doing this stuff. They loved him and the banjo. When I get out there, the leaves trees they are ivy, the trees they are green. What the hell is that shit? People, shut up! Go to hell! And so forth. And my entire set was people shouting invective at me. And I am sinking into the floor. We drag ourselves out of there. We're in the car. Bill says, remember that gig I told you about in Newport Beach? This one was yours. And it's true, and I thought about that for the second one, which I won't go into the detail because I cringe every time I even think about it, was St. Valentine's Day. Now, I don't call St. Valentine's Day, I call it by its true name, I call it International Emotional Blackmail Day. But I was doing a Valentine's Day dinner, storytelling and singing songs at a Valentine's Day dinner for an elder care center in Glendale. The music went over okay, but I start to tell the story of the twins of Maha. That's the only love story I know.
Jesus, Will.
And I'm telling this story, realizing that 90% of my audience has been speaking Armenian until they were about 40. And all I can say is, make sure you know your audience before you go up.
As Holstock and McLeod learned, generally speaking, no matter how good the whaling tune is, Greenpeace is not going to applaud. That actually happened. They were down in San Diego, they were singing whaling songs and nautical songs, and they got out there and they did this gig, and they played and they sang their songs, and they're like, and the bonny fish today when she goes fishing for the whale, and it's heeled back me lads. Come on everybody, clap along! And it was a tour group from Greenpeace. So yeah, know your audience. So I'm going to ask just a quick thing because we had some new people join us. We're going to finish it off with a quick story from Mr. McCarty, and then if Bill can give us the world's shortest version of Matty Groves, we'll go there.
Oh, all right.
So, Mr. McCarty.
All right. How many of you have or have had kids who graduate or graduating from college, going to graduate from college?
Or have.
Okay. This is the ending of a story, my favorite story to tell, which is a story about my daughter. It's a story that I call That's My Baby. And this is the ending of this story. In 1995, my daughter graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in education. Just as the ceremony was about to commence, I pulled my daughter to the side and said, Carla, it is my right, it is indeed my duty as your father to embarrass you at this wonderful moment in your life. I said, when you go across that stage to get your diploma, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to yell at the top of my lungs, Not only did I do that, I didn't just stand up at my seat. I walked up to the front of the auditorium. I stood in front of those hundreds of people. And when my daughter crossed that stage, I pointed at her, yelled it, and I did louder than I just did now. I don't want the security running in here trying to see what's up. My daughter knows me. She knows that I am going to do this. She knows that there is no escape. She says, okay, Daddy, but Daddy, please, Daddy, don't do your yell.
Come on in.
What a great idea. An addendum. A few years ago, my daughter got a master's in fine art. And when I went to that graduation, not only did I yell, "That's my baby," not only did I do my yell, but you know that horn they blow at the soccer game? Got me one of those. She's working on another degree. I'm gonna get me a cannon.
And now, a little bit of balladeering and musical accompaniment from my good friend, Mr. Bill Howard.
The world's shortest version of Mandy Groves. Now, remember my friend Bill Coon talked about this. He said that he knew a girl who knew this song, and she'd be at a party. We were at the kind of parties where you actually sing this shit. And he said, yeah, she'd start singing Mandy Groves, and I'd get bored, so I'd go into the other room, watch part of a basketball game, and then go buy myself a six-pack of beer and watch some more of the basketball game, drink part of that six-pack of beer, then drive across town, go make love with my best friend's wife, come back, watch the rest of the basketball game, finish that six-pack of beer, walk back in the room, she'd still be singing Mandy Groves. And so these are a fairly long song. One nice thing about the folk, well, I'll tell you a little bit about folk processing within this process here.
You have to be a little louder. Loud.
What, the banjo?
No, to them.
Well, I'll sing loud.
There you go.
Hi-oh, holiday, the best day of the year. Little Mandy Groves, the church did go some holy words to hear. Despite the ladies dressed in black as they stepped into the youth. Lord Arlen's wife was gay and glad about among the few. She tripped it up the Mandy Groves, her eyes so low cast down. Pray, come with me, say as you pass through town. And I cannot go and I dare not go, I fear to cost my life. For I see the little ring you wear, you are Lord Arlen's wife. Oh, it may be false and it may be true, but I can't deny it all. Arlen's gone to consecrate King Henry at Whitehall, and her little maid to listen well to all that they did say. And ere the sun did rise, he quickly sped away, and he did run the King's highway, swam across the tide. There did stop until he come to bring Lord Arlen's side. Oh, what news, my bully boy? What news brings you to me? Already my castle walls bring down my lady with baby. Your castle is standing well, the little page did say. Mandy Groves is bedded up with your fine lady gay. It's usually about the middle of the song that I start making a point about the folk process. And about all I will say is this, is that many of the folk songs that we know go through a whole series of changes from one to another because we forget stuff and we put it to different tunes. Like, for example, this one is put to the American tune, Shady Grove, and so forth and so on. So we're left with only just little pieces of it. Like, how many of you know all the verses to Good King Wenceslas? Okay, yeah, you do, but that's because you hang out with your dad and me. Okay. The main reason I say this is, I don't know the middle of this song. So, just to recap it up a little bit, Arlen gets his army together, he marches on Scotland, and it turns out that Mandy Groves has a friend there in the army. Boy doesn't wish Mandy in the arms, so he blows his horn loud and shrill. And Mandy and Lady Arlen are basking in the warm afternoon. And Mandy says, I thought I heard a horn, and she says, they're calling the sheep to fold. Alright then. He hears a horn again. What's that? They're calling in the cattle. He blew it again. What's that? Oh, that's the geese. Oh, very well. And Mandy Groves, he turned his head, took her down to sleep. When he woke, Lord Arlen was standing at his feet. And how do you like my bed, says he. How do you like my sheets? How do you like my fair young bride that lies in your arms asleep? How do you answer a question like that? That's why I like your bed, says he. Better I like your sheets. And it's best I like your fair young bride that lies in my arms asleep. struck more, darling, struck more, that he struck no more. Get up in my very own bride, put on your pretty clothes. Tell me, do you like me best or like your Madame Rose? There's another one, how do you answer that one? She's game. She cradled Maddie's dying head, kissed him cheek and chin. It's Maddie Rose I love the best, with Arlen and all his kin. So he took her by the lily white hand, led her down the hall, and with his sword he cut off her head, and he flung it against the wall.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to finish off the last couple of raffle items here. Are you guys enjoying yourselves? I have a favor to ask of you. By the way, for those of you who got here late, I'm True Thomas, the storyteller, also known as Robert Sawyer, story consultant. This is the illustrious Michael D. McCarty. And this is Bill Howard, balladeer and raconteur extraordinaire, and other big words.
So,
Here we go. Who called me
the last three items. 793. 793.
Congratulations.
Story bag, I'll explain it to y'all later. Or that book there, Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, a classic. Seven, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. Going once.
Must have been delicious.
Yes, that's the story bag.
Okay, wasn't sure. Didn't want to make up with something that they needed.
Yep. No 7, 8, 9. Okay, 7, 8, 7. All right. And the last, so I'll let her come out and see what she picks, and then we'll go for
So my favorite ask of you is this. If you like the storytelling, if you like the storytelling classes, please tell the management, tell the folks at Wyrd Con that you enjoyed this and you want to see more of it. Because I was very lucky to invite and have them donate their performances, but I wouldn't mind so much if, they accidentally, got paid or something to come join us. So, but in any case, if you like the whole storytelling track, please let the folks know.
2 more items. 779. 779. Going once, going twice. 783. 783.
Yes?
Why do the trees always grow tall?
The trees always grow tall, breasts are always milk white, steeds are always berry brown. These are called ballad conceits.
Oh, okay.
775. All right. All righty. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. So you have an option. You may have that, or you may have that. This is the end. This is it.
Yeah.
I have nothing else to pull out the bag. Okay, yes, my car's up there. Oh, by the way, just couple little tidbits. If you are interested in storytelling, you have questions about storytelling, this is a site at the National Storytelling Network website that they collect articles. You're trying to find out something, this is the place to go besides me. Last one, 791. 791. All right. I will deliver it to you since this is the last one and you got that serious hat. You go, girl. Work that hat. All right.
Bob's your uncle cards are up here too, in case you want to get a hold
Well, yes, well, since everybody's putting their cards up, I guess I'll go ahead. All right, so come on up here, gentlemen. All right, everybody stand up here on the stage. I'm so sorry some of you got here so late, but I just wanted to say, photographic moment. Okay. Yeah. All right, old man, you can do it. So I just want to say, first of all, many thanks to my two good friends, Mr. Bill Howard, Mr. Michael D. McCarty, the Masters of Storytelling. And I want to say thank you guys to you, because you guys are story listeners and storytellers, and between us, the magic happens. Bless you, safely.